Thank you so much for coming. On behalf of our editor, Michael Anastasi, we welcome you and hope you'll have an enjoyable evening of listening to inspiring, thoughtful, and thought-provoking stories from extraordinary members of our community. The Tennessean created Black Tennessee Voices in the spring of 2020 as a means to change our coverage from telling stories about communities of color to telling stories for, with, and by communities of color. The murder of George Floyd on Memorial Day 2020 and the subsequent racial reckoning in America accelerated the work. And it started with a special section on Tennessean.com and in the Sunday Insight section. It turned into a closed Facebook group, a weekly newsletter, and the first annual Storytellers event here at the National Museum of African American Music last fall. So Black Tennessee Voices has won top honors with the Online News Association, Society of Professional Journalists, and the Tennessee Press Association for taking on the issues of the day. Your support of this event and your subscription to the Tennessean helps support this initiative and advances public service journalism. And if you're not a subscriber, we welcome you to come on board at Tennessean.com/subscribe. Thank you to our host, NAMAM, and to our sponsors. A round of applause to the Vanderbilt University Center for Latin American and Caribbean Latinx Studies. Let's give an applause and thanks to the Housing Fund. And last but not least, to Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. I want to give a special thanks to our storytellers, Patricia Bethel, Marshall Crawford, Jill Fitchard, Timothy Hughes, and Shannara Williamson. I want to thank our MCs, who will be coming up in just a moment, country music beat reporter Marcus Dowling and social media producer Kiana Billings. And finally, I want to thank the founding Black Tennessee Voices curator, LeBron Hill, who started organizing this event before he left to Chattanooga. LeBron couldn't be here tonight, but he sends a big good luck to all of the storytellers tonight. And we are searching for his successor. So if you know some good journalists to join us here at the Tennessean for Black Tennessee Voices, we are looking for you. We want to thank Beverly Burnett, a consummate supporter of our efforts, who organized all the food here. And finally, Gary Eswick, who helped organize tonight's event. Gary is our race and justice editor and a fellow editorial board member, and I want to bring him on stage to kick things off. So please have a wonderful night.
Woo! How's everybody doing today?
All right, doing well, doing well.
I don't know about you, but this threw off my schedule. Church closed, on a Sunday, so that's why I didn't have a dress shirt on. Hope my pastor forgives me. I also want to talk about LeBron Hill, our former colleague. He's an example of what we want more of at the Tennessean, what we strive to have more of in our community of Nashville. Diverse opinions. I miss our chats. I don't know how many of you guys have met a journalist, but we're normal people. We shop at the same grocery store as you do, work out at the same gym. Sometimes run the red light, sorry, I hate to admit it. We're normal people, and LeBron was a great example of that, and so many of us, Nicole, Kiana, David, myself, we're just normal people. One of our conversations I remember having with LeBron and some of my other coworkers, LeBron thought it was okay to, you're gonna get a kick out of this, to get a haircut in a barbershop 1 week, and 2 weeks later, get a haircut in that same barbershop with a different barber. We're like, no, you can't do, no, you're breaking the code. And imagine having a 45-minute conversation about that. But we all come from different perspectives. I'm from New Orleans.
Hey.
Love it, yeah. We have folks from New York and California and Chicago, and of course Nashville, of course Tennessee and Memphis, Knoxville. And we think we tell our best stories when we all come together in a collegiate atmosphere and just do great work. So thanks for being here. Thanks for helping us amplify, normalize, and celebrate Black voices. I got one homework assignment for everybody, one ask. This can't be an annual event. This can't be something that we only do once a year and then see you next year. We need to have these conversations on a regular basis. So if you know someone that has a talent for telling stories, send them our way. If you know a story in the community that needs to be told, send them our way. Let's not wait until they're multimillionaires. I mean, everyone's going to do that story, right? You got a story about someone that's trying to figure things out? Send them our way. Don't just send us people that are ready-made, and that's important. It's great if we're going to write those stories too, but we want to tell the stories that are in the shadows. We want to tell the stories that inspire people, that really give a full understanding of the human experience. So, love to talk to you guys after about that, and thanks for coming. I'm going to bring in our co-hosts for the evening, Marcus K. Dowling and Shannara Billings.
Oh, hey, 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 hey. Oh, I mean, I could do this all night, but we good. Thank you. My name is Marcus K. Dowling. I'm the Nashville country music reporter at the Tennessean. I'm a native Washingtonian, and oh, that's what's up. I love it. And I'm the 2021 Chet Filippo Excellence in Country Music Journalism Award winner and the 2022 National Headliner Award winner. And for those of us who work at USA Today, I'm a Best of Gannett Award winner too. And I'm going to say about my co-host very quickly. You're watching a very incredible moment in this young lady's career, because she said to me backstage, I'm going to put you on blast, but it's okay, I still love you. She said, I haven't won anything yet. I just started my job. It's your first job, right?
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. My name is Shannara Billings. I'm the social media producer here at the Tennessean. This is my first job, my first media job. So I'm very blessed to be here, very blessed to be in front of you all.
Yeah. So you thought you would get away with this scot-free.
I definitely did.
But you're not going to get away from this scot-free. Watch a very important moment in this woman's career. Because she thinks that she's not going to be an award-winning journalist. So what you're going to see here tonight is the modern state of American journalism. I'm going to say something on the stage that might be true and might be offensive to some people, but it's absolutely the case. A lot of y'all don't read. And you don't read the Tennessean, but you should.
Very much so.
But I will tell you the thing that you do. You engage with us online, you engage with us via social media, and that's her job. So you might not read my words, and I might be offended, but you see what she does online. Yes. Whether that's Instagram, whether that's Facebook, whether that's TikTok, whether that's
YouTube. Everything that's a social media platform, I do it. I'm the girl for the job, okay?
Absolutely. And the thing for me is I'm a country music reporter, so more so than anything, and people may feel a way about me being a country music reporter, or they don't, I don't care. But the big takeaway is that I care deeply about stories, and I care about people who tell stories, and I care about unique stories that people tell that create dynamic evolutions in society. I remembered to say that this morning, and I stared in the mirror. So please give me a round of applause. Y'all don't want me to sweat up here. So the big thing about that is that this event, more so than anything, reflects in America's most dynamic state, America's most intriguing state, America's most difficult state to understand these days. African American stories are extraordinarily important. And you're going to get 5 of them tonight from people that are in your community. And I think that what Gary said earlier, it bears re-mentioning. If you know people who live next door to you, who live down the street from you, who deliver your mail, who deliver your DoorDash, I don't care. They have stories. And they're unique American people living in, again, the most dynamic, difficult, and intriguing and interesting state in the Union in 2023. So they should be in these seats, they should be on this stage. So kind of, you could let them know what they're going to be seeing tonight.
They're going to be seeing 5 storytellers with a dynamic background. They're going to be people that are going to inform us, give us insight on their lives. And
CEOs, right?
Yes, some CEOs. We got some big people out here. CEOs. I know.
Okay.
I can't wait. When they said CEO, I started.
I'm going to make you do that again. There you go. All right, so let's we could talk all night, but I think there are people who deserve to talk more than us.
Yes.
So let's get to the storyteller.
Yes, so I'm going to introduce our first storyteller of the night. It's going to be Miss Patricia Bethel. Patricia Bethel is a project and program management senior principal consultant at NTT Data Services. She also has served as a board chair of the Lipscomb University Black Alumni Council since it was founded in 2018 and is stepping down in September of this year.
By all means, have a seat, ma'am. Have a seat. No, hold your applause. You don't know everything about this woman yet. Y'all are just going to be applauding people for no apparent reason.
I know I got a couple more lines. They got to give him a thank you.
Woman finish. Let her do her job.
She especially misses LeBron Hill because he is one of the Black students who triggered our resolution as Black alums to return to Lipscomb and provide support to them. She graduated from Lipscomb in 1972. She started off as a mathematics teacher in Alabama and worked in information technology for 43 years. Give her a round of applause. 43 years. Thank you for your service. She earned her MBA in healthcare from George Washington University. Please, once again, give me and Miss Patricia a warm welcome.
I'm going to share the story of my daughter's death and the impact on my life. And I'm going to share it through the eyes of 4 characters. One of the characters is her father, Charles, and that's Stephanie when she was maybe 5 or 6 years old, and that's Stephanie when she was a baby. And there, of course, is the younger me. And then over there's Stephanie as a baby, and then there's her best friend for life, who's there beside her in the hospital. I'm going to share her story through the eyes of these 4 characters. Stephanie's father, Charles Bethel, was an Air Force veteran. He polished his shoes every day. He was a strict disciplinarian. We got married June 9th, 1973. He was a 1972 Tennessee State graduate and worked as a public school science teacher. Early in his teaching career, he was attacked by a student, and the subsequent injury caused him to have surgery on his upper neck and lower back. After the first surgery, the doctor told me that he would never be able to work again. He died December 13, 2013. I was at the hospital in Chattanooga, Tennessee. They had called me from the emergency room, and they said, get there immediately. And when he passed, I was holding his hand. They resuscitated him. And then they asked me, and he passed a second time. And they said, do you want us to keep trying? And he had told me, he said, if I stop breathing, he said, I don't want you to bring me back. And so I was there holding his hand, and I abided by his wishes. And there was something about it that made me think about Stephanie. And my father, as well as his dear sister who had lupus, had been such a source of support to Stephanie, and they also died in 2013. French L. Shorkey was the person that Stephanie met at Lipscomb University on the second day that they were freshmen. They became best friends forever. And Stephanie had gone to Lipscomb. It was her second choice because she had been accepted into Bowdoin College in Brunswick, Maine. And she had made the decision that that was where she was going. And then 2 weeks before graduation from high school, she was stricken with lupus. And she spent those 2 weeks in the hospital. She had a blood clot, and she was crying every day. She said, Mom, she says, I'm gonna miss my graduation. And her doctor said, no, you're not gonna miss your graduation. We're gonna get you out of this hospital, and you will be able to graduate. Steph had made up her mind as a very young child that she wanted to become an attorney. That was her dream. And Stephanie always had a loud voice as a child. Her vocabulary was more advanced than her age. She had a passion. She loved writing and she loved reading. And she wrote a book about her life. It's entitled Life, Love, and Lupus. And it was one that she wrote and it was published in 2011. And you probably know by now that she had lupus because I used the word lupus several times. And yes, she had lupus, and it is a horrible disease. It is one that basically most African American, most of the victims of lupus are African American women. Stephanie, as a child, had a very loud voice, and her vocabulary was more advanced than her age. She loved writing stories and reading, and that was a lifelong love of hers. My favorite story about Stephanie was when she took her favorite toy over to a neighbor's house. And it was one of those toy cars where you could sit in it and she would pedal to move it. She came back home after a while and she didn't have a car with her. And so I said, what happened to your car, Stephanie? She said, my friends, she says, they had never seen a car like that and they liked it so much. She says, I gave it to them and I smiled because that was Stephanie. She was a generous, generous person. Of course, as her mother, she says, I replaced her toy car. Her father, as I mentioned, was a veteran who polished his shoes, and he was a very strict disciplinarian. On the other side of being a parent, I think some of her friends said that her mother was loosey-goosey. And I had basically one parenting guideline, and that was, I told Stephanie, I said, if you tell me the truth, you will never, ever get in trouble. And when she was a teenager, the teenagers would laugh at her and they would say, she tells her mother everything. And her friends would say, well, don't tell Stephanie anything that you don't want her mother to know, because she will tell her mother. And that was our relationship. And I remember she was just such a good kid because I never gave her a curfew. I didn't have, a lot of rules. That's what I said. And I'm not saying that this is a great parenting style. I'm simply telling the truth. And what was really amazing about Stephanie was that she never came home after 10 p.m. The one time she was very late, she did call me and she told me that she was out with friends and they were having a problem with something or the other. And so I thought, well, with the loosey-goosey mother, she really was a great child. It's like she never got into any trouble. If she was your friend, she was your friend for life. So that was my dear daughter, Stephanie. So I'd like to talk next about the relationship that she had with Franchelle. As I mentioned, that was her best friend in college. And Franchelle would frequently call me, and she would say, Mrs. Bethel, we're at the hospital. She says, we've got this. She says, don't you worry. She says, you don't need to drive all the way from Atlanta, she says, to Nashville. And it was just a beautiful thing, the relationship with her best friend for life. And now, her best friend for life takes care of the old mother. She is a wonderful attorney, and Stephanie was so blessed to have a friend who cared so very much about her. So next I'd like to talk a bit more about Stephanie, because she spent the last 9 years of her life living with her parents as an adult. And that is a very interesting situation to be in, because you know who your child is when they're growing up, when they're in high school, when they're in college. But it's quite different when you're living together and your child is an adult. Stephanie became a social worker when she graduated from Lipscomb. And Franchelle, of course, they were like twins. She became a social worker as well. And so they got jobs at the same company. They both worked for the state of Tennessee. And she got the idea when when they were working, that she wanted to get a house. And what I'm trying to do is to share with you characteristics of Stephanie. She was loyal, she was generous, she was loving, and she was a really great kid. And she asked me, would Mom, she says, Mom, I think I would like to buy a house. And she said, will you help me? And I said, no, darling. I said, I won't help you purchase a house at this time in your life. And so she said, well, will you ask your dad if he will purchase the house for me? And I said, no, I will not ask my dad if he'll purchase the house for you. And she was rather in shock, because she was accustomed to the loosey-goosey mother always saying yes. And so she called her grandfather, and he said, I think that's just like such a wonderful idea. And before I knew it, it's like they were closing on the house. And this is what I loved about Stephanie. It's like she was fearless. Whatever she wanted to get done, it's like she just did it. She figured out a way to get it done. It is very difficult for me, even now, to talk about the death of Stephanie. And I actually had someone who told me, you need to let go and let her rest in peace. And it's really interesting what people say to you, because each of us grieves in our own way. But I am who I am, and she was the joy of my life. And when she died, it was the most traumatic thing that has ever happened to me. I experienced the death of my parents. I experienced the death of her father, my husband. I experienced the death of grandparents. But there was nothing like the death of my child. You do not expect your child to die before you do. And so here is Pat. She's the person who is always in charge, the person who always handles everything. And there I was a wreck. I cried every night before I went to bed. Every morning when I woke up, I would cry and cry and cry. And this went on for quite some time. And finally I said, I have to get help. And so I went in for counseling. And I think that, and I know that was actually the best thing that I could have done. And many times in our community, people are not quite comfortable with getting counseling. She says, but it was just a wonderful experience for me. And the counselor shared with me the fact that I had never grieved for all of these other losses that I had in my life, because I always had to think about taking care of Stephanie. My parents died, my husband died, but I always had to think about Stephanie. And I had not thought about it from that perspective, and she was absolutely right. It's like I never grieved for all the other losses that I had, and that's an important lesson to learn. You must learn to grieve, and each one of us grieves in our own way. I have just a little bit more that I'd like to share with you. When I graduated from Lipscomb University in 1972, I vowed that I would never return to that campus, and I would never donate a penny to my alma mater, as it was not exactly a welcoming environment for black students at that time. Stephanie had been accepted into her dream college, which was Bowdoin in Brunswick, Maine. And as I mentioned, she had already made up her mind that she wanted to be an attorney. And so when she was stricken with lupus, then she was in the hospital, and she was afraid she wasn't going to be able to participate in the graduation. And then once she did participate in the graduation, then she had to make a decision. Was she going to go to college in Maine, or was she going to go someplace else? And she made the decision that she was going to attend Lipscomb. So of course, parents always go back and they pull out all the old stories, and I told her, she said, that was in the olden days, Mom. She said, that was in the olden days. She says, things are different now. And so she decided that she was going to attend Lipscomb. And she did, and it was the best thing that ever happened to her. And she said, the only good thing, Mom, about lupus was that I met my best friend for life, and that was Franchelle. And when she got to the point where she couldn't live alone, her dad and I moved in with her. She had all of these friends, she says, from Lipscomb, through the years, who kept in contact with her. And she had a completely different experience than the one that I had when I was there. So finally, I guess I should wrap this up. And I should tell you I'm 71 years old, so, you know, we old people kind of wrap it up. So I told you about what a difficult time I had in dealing with her death. And after the year of counseling, the lady said, you're ready to soar. And I said, I will never soar again. But I did find a purpose. My purpose was to establish a scholarship fund in her memory at Lipscomb University. And that has brought such joy to my heart to be able to help students attend college. And the second thing that I put many hours into, and that was in the Lupus Foundation of America. And in fact, Saturday before last, we had a walk on the campus of Lipscomb University, and we raised $40,000 before anybody had walked. So I cut the ribbon, and I was just elated. And Stephanie, as I mentioned, or maybe I did mention, she wrote a book called Life, Love, and Lupus, and I'm in the process now of getting that book republished. She was such a gifted writer. So through all of my ramblings, what I wanted to say is this, basically, is that you may have all of these terrible things that happen in your life, because I would say we had a run of bad luck. My husband ended up on dialysis, as I mentioned, he died. But if one of Stephanie's favorite songs was, "The sun will come out tomorrow." And that is what I would like to leave with everyone. It's like, whatever are your challenges, whatever hard times you're having, the sun will come out tomorrow.
So again, that's just such an incredible story. Thank you so much for sharing. And again, that's the power of what we do here at Black Tennessee Voices. These are incredible stories that redefine lives and allow people strength and, give people community, and that's what we're all about. So I think we have someone else, correct?
Yes, we have Marshall E. Crawford Jr., MPA, President and CEO of the Housing Fund.
You have to do the dance. There we go.
Because he's CEO in his,
Right,
his name.
right.
You're right. You're right.
Good stuff.
So in 1995, Marshall started his banking career in Nashville before joining the nonprofit sector, where he now has over 20 years of experience. Marshall enlisted in the military, and upon completing his military service in the United States Army, he attended Western Kentucky University in Bowling Green, where he received a degree in finance. He obtained a Master's of Public Administration from the University of Nebraska at Omaha and an Executive Leadership Certification at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Sorry, I had a quick page turn.
It's all right.
In 2017, Marshall joined the Housing Fund, a CDFI private nonprofit revolving loan fund, as president and chief executive officer. For several years now, Marshall has been recognized as one of Nashville's most admired CEOs by his peers. However,
you got to do dance again.
oh, sorry.
Admired CEO.
Okay. However, his journey to get here has not always been celebrated, but we want to celebrate you here at the Tennessean. Marshall.
Yes.
Come on, here we go. Sunshine. What else? Rain. Oh yeah, here we go. Sunshine.
Okay.
Well, I'm a new kid. I'm just learning a lot about the world that I can't tell. Well, I'm so it ain't long. And when they think I ain't looking out for 'em, I mean take 'em out. I see the baseline, you can be moving. They can't take it. They just take it. They want the how, the raw makes naked. I can hear, you know the deal.
Okay.
Y'all have a story to tell.
Come on.
You have a story to tell? We can dance all night with all kind of story to
I
tell.
think y'all trying to battle a little bit.
Absolutely. My God.
I appreciate you, my brother.
Get to it.
Absolutely. Someone needs to take him. Someone needs to take him, were the words that were uttered by my grandmother during a family meeting when I was 14 years old. Someone needs to take him. Good evening. My name is Marshall Crawford, and it's so awesome to be able to share my story with you tonight. But before I share that story, and I don't mean to insult your intelligence, but I wanted to give you a little bit of definition about the word redemption, how I clearly define my life. Redemption is a noun, if you don't know. That is an act of being redeemed or atoned for a fault or a mistake. Being the Christian that I am, it's also known as a metaphor for actions that were achieved through that atonement. But the word that I like best, that is associated with the word redemption, is transformation. Because it talks about evolving from one being to a much better person. That life of redemption is what my story is all about. But as I search for examples, Booker T. Washington and Malcolm X were two examples that I would continue to read about to have a better understanding of who are people that have been atoned or redeemed throughout their lives. I fell in love with studying autobiographies and reading about their stories. But guess what? There were even more books out there that could help me become the person that I've always wanted to be. And when I found that one book called As a Man Thinketh, it changed my thinking. It allowed me to understand the depth of my soul, which is defined as my mind, my will, and my emotions. But let me tell you, my journey to getting here is a whole nother story. I grew up in a place known as Coatesville, Pennsylvania. Coatesville is what we always say. To a single mom trying to raise 5 siblings, 5 kids. Her name was Dorothy E. Crawford. She did the best she could with what she had, without the support of any of our fathers. And it was a very tough situation. She would move us all around. We lived in different cities throughout Pennsylvania, but then we went to Boston, where I was born, and then Seattle, Washington, where one of my sisters were born, and ended in Jacksonville, North Carolina, where she rests in peace. And through those journeys, it was tough on all of us. In fact, when I was in middle school, I went to every middle school in Coatesville, from North Brandywine to South Brandywine to Gordon. And during that time, she struggled to keep a roof over our heads and food in our stomachs. And as a result, I failed the 7th grade. And in falling behind, I couldn't understand. But it wasn't even that important. I knew my mom wasn't going to be able to pay for me to go to summer school, so it was no big deal. I just repeated the 7th grade, while all of my friends and girlfriends and everybody else went on to the 8th grade. Here I was, the big dummy, being held back. And I endured that. But I also became even more of a challenge for our family. I participated in criminal activities, stealing people's clothes off their clothesline. That's how I got new clothes. Or stealing out of the store. Or robbing convenience stores and people. And I was in the 7th grade. And the challenges that we went through. And then all of a sudden, one night at 2 o'clock in the morning, the cops pick me and my friends up. They take me to my mom, and they say the next time we pick him up, he's going to juvenile detention. My brother was already in prison. Our life was already in turmoil. So my mom made a decision. She called my grandmother. She said, we have to save him. So my grandmother said, send him to me. She packed up all of my stuff, and she put me on a Greyhound and sent me to my grandmother. That summer, I slept on my grandmother's couch. She was in a senior living house, apartment. I slept on her couch. She loved honeydew. She loved fruits. And so we'd get up every morning. I had to help her clean up. She'd make me breakfast. She would pray over me. And then I would go on about my business for the rest of the day. But then, just before the start of school, in the 9th grade, she called a family meeting, and she said, somebody has to take him. Somebody has to take him. My Uncle Jackie, who lived in public housing, had an extra room, and he decided he would take me. But in taking me, be it unknown to me, until I was 23 years old, he took my dad and my stepmother to court for child support. His own brother, who lived not too far, He took him to court for child support. The judge said, you either take him and raise him, or you pay child support. They decided to do the latter. And the emotional trauma that I experienced through those 4 years of living there is a story for another day and another time. But I would go on, and I would graduate from high school with honors. And then I would get accepted to Penn State University. It was on my birthday, May 3rd, 1985, when I turned 19 years old, that I was accepted into college. 19. Think about that. But I was accepted to Penn State. I was a Penn State football fan. Nittany Lions, we are Penn State! Yes. I was accepted. I was excited. Man, my first year, my first semester there, I was juiced. I was jacked. I was taking classes. And I made the dean's list in my first semester. But then I get a letter from my stepmom telling me that I was a man and I was no longer accepted in her house. The emotional, I just made the dean's list thinking I was doing something exciting, that I was changing, I was making a difference. And then it dawned on me. Here I am looking at my classes for the next semester. And I was taking the 12th grade all over again. Remedial courses in English and in math and study skills. Took the 12th grade in my first year at Penn State all over again. I couldn't understand what was happening. But I was like, you know what? I'm at Penn State. We are. So then I was like, hey, I joined a fraternity. Phi Beta Sigma Incorporated. Hanging out with my bros, kicking it with the step shows, enjoying ourselves with the parties at the Paul Robeson Culture Center. You know, we joy and pain, kicking it, having a good time. But when I got so immersed into Phi Beta Sigma that I forgot the real importance of why I was in school. But I couldn't understand this. My boys who I hung out with, they were still going to class, passing and graduating, but yet I'm majoring in Phi Beta Sigma. Looked at my grades. Next thing you know, the letter that I get is that you are no longer welcomed here. I failed out of Penn State because I didn't realize I wasn't adequately prepared for college. I realized I had absolutely no discipline for going to class and doing the things that you're supposed to do when you go to college. Next thing you know, I'm right back in Coatesville and Westchester, sleeping on somebody's couch. Man, the rage just started to build. I was the first to graduate from high school and the first to go to college. I started blaming everybody for my failures. I became angry. I became bitter. I became mean. I became hurt, disappointed, enraged. And my aunt said, that's not going to do anything for you. You gotta do something different. So I went down, I took the test for the military. And then I got the letter. They wanted me. They accepted me. They said, we will take you. And that's what they did. They took me, but guess what they got? They got a young man that was angry, that was hurt, that was mad. And then I saw this movie called Officer and a Gentleman. An officer and a gentleman I was not. The character that Richard Gere played was me. I was looking in the mirror. He did the same thing. And the drill sergeants was drilling him. I remember when I got that mud bath. because I was so self-centered. I thought I was better than everybody. The young men that I was in boot camp with, or basic training, there were so many people in there that were in class trying to get their GED. And I done spent 3 years at Penn State University. We are Penn State. And I left without a degree. I thought I was smarter than them. I thought I was better than them. But I was so self-centered. And the drill sergeants was like, you gotta go. Get out, quit. And like Richard Gere, I have no other place to go. I have nobody else. Then get your stuff together. Get your stuff together. I went from Fort Jackson, South Carolina, to Fort Dix, and then they sent me to Germany. Nuremberg, Germany is where I went. And in Germany, something started to happen. When the military is not fighting a war, it's preparing for war. They taught us about the importance of preparation every single day. Maintenance on our vehicles, maintenance on our weapons, making sure that our jobs that we were assigned to do was efficient and effective, because at a time of war, there is no time for preparation again. Up at 5 a.m. every morning, teaching discipline. If you are on time for formation, you're late. You are known as AWOL, absence without leave. So it's about being there on time, all the time. And then it was about the man in front of you, the woman behind you, the person to the right, and the person to the left. We support and we take care of each other, because if you don't, in a time of war, somebody dies. Somebody dies. These principles became ingrained and engulfed, and something started changing inside of me. Transformation started happening. The evolution of who I became and what I was. The anger started disappearing. The bitterness started disappearing. And the support became infection. They sent me back from stateside to Fort Knox, Kentucky, where I met 2 men who took me on like a son, Sergeant Gayfield, Lieutenant Robinson, and they started just imparting in me the dynamics and the importance of being strong and being mindful, being considerate and caring. And they loved on me. Next thing you know, I was getting awards. The commander pinning a medal on me for job well done. Job well done. And I felt the evolution of who I was and what I was becoming. But I had unfinished business. So in 1992, I departed from the United States Army and went back to college. I went to Western Kentucky University. I never transferred any credits from Penn State because I wanted to start anew. I graduated from Penn State with a degree in finance in 2.5 years. Better prepared, much more disciplined, and understanding the importance of a support system. Somebody needs to take him. Penn State took me. The military took me. God took me. When I evolved, Western Kentucky, UNO, Georgetown took me. In closing, all I want to say is, Nashville, thank you for taking me.
Real quick, we have to mention Tennessean.com. There's a deal there for 6 months for like $1. correct? Anybody who's a Tennessean person here? 6 months for $1. Like, if you guys want to read, I'm going to stress again the importance of reading. I love what you do, but people need to read my words.
That's the fun part. I just show up and, how you doing? Yeah, sorry. But before we go on though, I gotta say, I've been at the Tennessean since April, and I've never seen you move like that. Now, where that's been at?
I have to keep secrets, you know? Like, I live a broad and dynamic and diverse life. And,
Okay.
you know, so anyway.
So when we get to work Monday, you gonna be doing that?
I cover country music. We can't dance. I have to do the achy breaky. That's what I gotta do. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Y'all, nobody saw that. All right, so Jill Fitchard works in the field of police oversight. Like police oversight. She's an African American woman who's been a Nashville resident for a quarter century. How many people have been Nashville residents for a quarter century in this room? Aren't you fascinated that a black woman does police oversight in Nashville, Tennessee? She's worked in my hometown of Washington, D.C. as well, and the police department there. Her current position is the executive director of Metro Nashville Community Oversight. And she served the Nashville community for many years and held numerous positions. She's worked with the private sector, the city of Nashville, and the state of Tennessee, where her degree in criminal justice has allowed her to attain leadership roles and have positions as a case manager, probation and parole officer, chief criminal investigator, and a criminal justice college instructor. I mean, that's a lot, right? That's a lot. My God. So, without further ado, Jill Fitchard, I'd like to have you come to the stage.
Where will we be now? We are the ones we've been waiting for. We can change the world.
Well, I'm Jill Fitchard. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I'm so very full and grateful to see all of your faces. I'm going to start with talking about, I'm going to show a video clip first, and then I'll start. I wanted to just kind of.
But how much would you be willing to give up to protect your family? Would you trade your personal liberty for your personal safety? That's the trade-off people in one apartment complex in San Francisco are already facing. A trade-off that could be the wave of the future. Over the hill from the heart of San Francisco lies one of this beautiful city's few blemishes.
586 Rich Splendid.
A dangerous neighborhood that looks the same as too many others all over America. Captain, I get the feeling you don't like the fact that we're roaming around here in the middle of the night, huh? I mean, is it dangerous here?
Apprehensive. Very apprehensive. That's what
It's Saturday night at 2 a.m. And for Captain Harlan Wilson, it's business as usual in the Sunnydale housing projects. How dangerous is it here on a given night?
Just had a homicide a little while ago.
For years, the symbol of the drug-driven violence that seized this community was just up the block at the notorious Geneva Towers, two low-income high-rise buildings where drug dealers ruled.
You could not go out into the hallway. Go out in the hallway, no chance. Because you were terrified, you were terrorized, you were involved, there were shootings in the hallways.
Bodies was coming out of the windows.
No.
Dead people.
For the 1,000 or more residents of the towers, the place they had to call home was more like a living nightmare. Did you want to move out of here, and could you financially?
No, most definitely. I wanted to move as far away from Geneva's towers as possible.
Police officers will go some places where angels fear to tread. We didn't even want to tread into the towers.
This story is about a girl whose mother was a young teenager when she was born. She was raised mostly by her grandmother and extended family. and because her mother was a child. And when she finally started living full-time with her mother and brother, they were very poor. They lived on public assistance, and they lived in a small apartment that was situated over a store on a very busy street. At some point, her mother was laid off from Greyhound, and that just started a trajectory, a down spiral of poverty. They were sleeping on friends' couches, sleeping in her car. The girl was washing up in gas stations. They were sleeping on people's floors and couches, but they also were moving from shelter to shelter around the city of San Francisco. And if anyone knows anything about San Francisco, it's one of the highest rent areas in the country. It has a huge homelessness, unhoused individuals live everywhere. It's very, very difficult for people to be able to afford to live in San Francisco. They were on what they called in that day welfare. Her mother would hide her car around the corner, go to the welfare office. They would check to see what kind of assets you had. They would ask her, do you have a car? And she would say no, even though the car was parked 3 blocks away. But they would follow you a little bit, the social workers. It was very, very, very stressful for this young woman who had 2 children. They eventually got approved for a public assisted housing development. And that was what you saw, the Geneva Towers. And so the young girl, when she was told that she would have her own bed in her own bedroom, and that she would have a very nice place to live. She wouldn't have to sleep in cars any longer, and she wouldn't have to sleep in shelters. So as she drove over there in the car that her mother wasn't supposed to have with her little brother, it was very large. It was the biggest thing she had ever seen. It was gigantic. It was 21, 22 stories high. It was 2 buildings. It was an A building and a B building. The A building being the worst, the most notorious building. It was full of drug violence. Gang members were the security of the building. And in California, they have real gangs. Very deadly, dangerous gang members were really taking over that building. And so when the young girl walked into the building, her heart sank. She was frightened. It was big, it was looming, it was dark, and it was just full of people running around. It wasn't what she anticipated. It wasn't what the social worker told her. She had put this story in her mind of what she thought it would be. And you're driving over there, San Francisco's so beautiful. And she saw so many beautiful things, but when they got to that area, she was really, really disappointed about what she saw. She lived in that building for the next several years. And when she was around 14, she was excited to go to her first school dance. Or go to a dance with friends that they had saw on the radio that they were having a dance downtown at the San Francisco Tennis Club. And so she and her 3 friends decided that they would go, asked their parents if they could go. Parents said, yes, you can go. She went with her friend. She was trying on her friend's shoes. She had never in her life walked in high heels, which was really a kitten heel. It wasn't a high heel, but it was a kitten heel. And she thought it was a heel. And so her mother and one of her friends' mothers, they decided that we all could go together. They could all go together. And so as they began to go to this tennis club, they were in the car chatting. Everybody was having a good time. It would be the first dance for all 3 girls. They entered into the car, got downtown. There was a lot of people around. And what happened next changed the life of this young girl and her mother. So she was told, her mother told her to go inside the building to determine whether or not the party was there. And so when she went into the building, she went up the stairs and she's in her cute little shoes. She had on a sparkly shirt. She thought she was really, really cute, had it going on. So she goes up the stairs and the place is really dark. She goes up the stairs and she sees people running around back and forth. She hears an alarm going off. She doesn't really know what's going on. But as she's walking down the hallway, she sees that the gift shop the whole window has been smashed in. And people are running everywhere and there's clothing and merchandise all over the floor. And so she decides I better run too. And she begins to run down the stairwell. And as she gets to the bottom of the stairs, she kicked some clothing or something, picked it up, went to her mother's car, hit the back of the hood, I'm sorry, of the trunk, and her mother opened the trunk. They're sitting there talking. When she put those 2 items in the trunk, someone said, "Don't move." And so she stood still. She felt something cold pressed up against her, the temple of her the right temple. And she knew at that moment her heart sank. She was very scared. She froze in that moment. She didn't know how to respond. She was terrified. There was a police officer there with a gun pointed at her head. She was 14. Her mother got out of the vehicle and became hysterical and began to go back and forth with the police and pleading for them to put their gun away and to uncuff their daughter. That girl was me. And I was hauled off to juvenile detention and placed in juvenile detention for about a week. My mother was arrested for disorderly conduct. And at some point the case was dismissed. I never went to court. And it really changed my thought process, my mental state. I thought police officers were there to protect you. Later I found out that they had everything that was on the scene, every piece of merchandise that was on the scene, they threw in the back of my mother's trunk, and basically said that I had broken into the tennis club, and that I had stolen all that merchandise. And so what happened after that was just a change in what I thought police were there. What they were there for, they were there to help, is what I thought. And so it started a process in me of how could I, as an individual, what could I do differently? And so, as you heard about my career, my whole life changed in that moment. What I thought about policing, what I thought about safety, where we lived and what I was experiencing there. It was violent, it was tragedy after tragedy. And if you've never lived in public housing, and especially a high-rise, you just would never understand how it is to live in a place where when you go into the elevator, you push the button, the doors open and there's no elevator there. And so you had to be on guard and be careful in every moment that you lived like that. And that's what it looks like to live in a poor community that has very little resources, that even the police won't come to help you when you call. And so what happens is the people in that community begin to police themselves. And it was tragic. And at some point, my mother moved me out to live with my aunt and my uncle because of the danger that she felt that we were experiencing, myself and my little brother. And so I will say that policing, for me, this work that I do is a heartfelt work. It is the type of work that has challenged me in every aspect of my life. I went on to become a police officer in Washington, D.C. My whole goal was to help people. And how that looked was different in every particular position that I've had. I spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C. doing different types of work. I wanted to do more than just patrol the streets, but I wanted to get to people in my areas. I wanted them to know me, not as just a police officer, but as a community member, as a person who wanted to show empathy and love and to assist them in any way that I could. I went on to do great work in the police department and made a decision to come to Tennessee. And when I came to Tennessee and started doing work with the YWCA, I think it propelled and changed my heart to how I wanted to, what help looked like. I started working at the Tennessee Prison for Women. And when I started working at the Tennessee Prison for Women, and you hear different stories of what women were experiencing, not only why they were in prison, but what happened to them to get them there. We all have work to do in this city. Everyone needs everyone. We can't do this work alone. And so I will say that each particular position that I've had was carefully crafted, curated, I believe, just for me. There were people that I needed to touch. There were people that I needed to reach. And I'm very thankful for each opportunity and every person that I've met. They have all changed my life, made me a better mother, made me a better friend, made me a better listener. They brought a lot of courage and told me what it looked like to be transformed. These are women who were in prison. These were women who were on parole and on probation. Some of them had done horrendous crimes or had been accused of that. And then I got a job, what I thought was my dream job. And that was to work at the Nashville Public Defender's Office as an investigator, working on capital cases, working with people who were accused of mass shootings, learning them, talking to their parents, trying to understand how they ended up where they were. This work that we do is heavy work, but on the other side of that is a person, a real individual who has, sometimes when you met them, it was the worst day of their life. They needed someone to make a phone call for them. Sometimes the little things that happen is that we forget that they just need a phone call. They just need someone to listen. Whether they were juveniles, children who were incarcerated, accused of crimes, or whether they were people who willingly and admittedly said that they did something so horrendous. They still needed empathy and love. They needed consideration and compassion. And what they needed most of all was that although they were charged with something, they were charged, they hadn't been convicted. And so we needed to still work through things with them and, deal with their cases. And then that brought me to police accountability work, which has been the toughest work I've ever done in my life, just to say so. It really has. It's been the most challenging work. It has been the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I don't know how I've done it. It has had to be the strength of God. There is no way that you can do this work without that. It has been rewarding. It has been the biggest opportunity of my career to have a place where citizens can come and say, this is what happened to me. I need someone to listen and believe me. And so I say all that to say that we all have to do this work together. It's not just about me. Each one of you play a part, a vital role in what we want our communities to be. The community is you. The community is me. But you may know someone that I will never know that needs your help, that needs a listening ear. You're that resource for them. You're that first stop for them. And so I would implore you, how do we do that? We all say, how do we do that? What we all need, DJ, is a little more of this. Love. That's what we need. We need more love. Where would we be without it? I need all of you to kind of get motivated. It's up to you, it's up to us. And we can't do it without love. That's the root of all of it. You are the one that we've been waiting for. You can change the world. It's not me. It's you. You can change the world. And it's going to be done with love. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate you.
So I definitely have to ask everyone in this room, by a show of hands, who knows somebody who should be on this stage? I'm gonna ask it once again.
Okay, I was about to ask you to ask one more time.
By a show of hands, who knows somebody who has the courage, the strength, the intelligence, the awareness, the life of incredible, intriguing stories that should be on this stage? That's better. That's better. Now, by the end of this night, we're gonna have everybody's hand up. I'm just letting you know so that you're fully aware before I ask the question again. So, I think that one of the biggest things about this, again, for me as a person that writes about storytelling every day of my life, is the fact that people find strength in the most incredible places. And I think that's one of the things we've learned so far, and I think that with our next story, we're going to hear more about that.
Yes, so our next storyteller is going to be Timothy Hughes. Timothy Hughes is a native of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and a cum laude honors graduate of Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. As an activist,
Shout out to North Nashville. One time for North Nashville. Thank you.
Okay. As an activist, advocate, blogger, commentator, columnist, community organizer, educator, human rights advocate, and public intellectual,
My man can't have more jobs than I
was about to say he has a lot of hats.
That's not. It might
No,
be.
it, yeah,
It might
no,
be.
but it
Might
is.
be.
Yeah. So, he works at the intersection of public policy and social justice. He is actively engaged with several local community-based grassroots coalitions, as well as several statewide, regional, national, and international organizations.
Amazing.
Timothy, how do you do it?
Timothy Hughes, let's get to the stage.
Yes, please.
Laissez les bons temps brûler. Laissez. I'm gonna do this. Alright. I was gonna say, it's the second line, man. It's the second line. Let's go.
Okay. I know that's right.
Thank you, DJ. Let me go and get started. Some of my fondest memories are from the harvest season growing up in southeast Louisiana. My younger siblings and I would travel down from the big city of Baton Rouge to visit my family in New Roads, Louisiana. Anybody from New Roads? I did not think so. Apparently, New Roads was named because of the fact that it was the last town, one of the last towns in that part of Louisiana to actually get paved roads. To call New Roads a small town does little justice to small towns. New Roads was tiny, a place where there were more pecan groves and sugarcane stalks than population. There we stayed with my maternal grandmother, this lady right here, Miss Elena Molina Johnson Mildeliste. Now, most people knew her as Miss Nellie, but we, her grandchildren, lovingly called her Mama. Every harvest season, we would gather like a hungry multitude at her tiny little brick house near the edge of town, and we'd tell lies and play spades and fill our bellies with her delicious gumbo. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever had a gumbo, or have ever tried your hand at making a gumbo. But making a gumbo, I mean a real good gumbo, is equal parts art and science, grace and grit, temperature and timing. And whatever it is that makes a good gumbo, my mama had in spades. She may have only gone to school through the 8th grade, But if such a thing exists, she surely had a doctorate in gumbo. Every harvest season, long before the chickens or the crack of dawn, my grandmother would rise. And she would begin her day with three things: a steaming hot cup of community coffee, her daily newspaper — I'm sure that's somebody who was talking about reading — her daily newspaper every morning, the Morning Advocate, and she would start her day with a song. Imagine this salt and pepper haired, praline-hued black woman, well-worn royal purple terry cloth bathrobe, freckled face shining, gap tooth smiling, softly humming a soulful rendition of When the Saints Go Marching In. The smell of dried bay leaves, freshly cut onions, filet powder, and cayenne pepper, swirling like a steaming hurricane above pot after pot of rumbling, tumbling, savory, seasoned, succulent deliciousness. Now, I wouldn't be much of a grandson if I just told y'all the whole recipe. Not to mention that I probably already said enough to get me cited for violating the code among the council of momos. But, nevertheless, I will share this very closely guarded Creole secret. Now, y'all need to pull out your notebooks and take this down. Perhaps the most important ingredient in every gumbo is the roux. Now, a basic roux is made of two ingredients: flour and fat. But the thing that most real gumbo folks know and other folks do not know is this secret ingredient. Are you listening? The secret ingredient is gratitude. My mama lived her entire life with gratitude. It was the one ingredient that she added to every dish, every day, at every meal, in every moment. And it is this ingredient that I want to highlight on today. This is a story about the time she let me help her make gumbo, and she taught me one of the greatest lessons I've learned in my life: the lesson of gratitude. Now picture, if you will, this precocious little boy. That's me with the smirk. Maybe 9 or 10 years old, I was voluntold by my grandmother that I would be assisting her in the kitchen as she prepared her gumbo. Now, between the long hours and the sweltering temperatures, I was not exactly enthusiastic about this new role. You see, in previous years, I had been the principal gumbo taste tester, a job for which I considered myself eminently more qualified. But this year, I'd been promoted to the kitchen assistant, which meant not only would I be helping her with the food preparation beforehand and the cleaning afterwards, but I would also be assembling the to-go bowls for what seemed like an endless coterie of extended family and friends and neighbors and even complete strangers. Upon learning this, I audibly grumbled to myself, I don't even know why we have to do this every year. As a matter of fact, we don't even know these people. They come down here, they eat everything, and we barely have anything left for ourselves. This is ridiculous. Yes, I was 9 in using words like ridiculous. Sensing my growing frustration, my mama cupped my slightly scrunched face in her warm, worn hands, and in a groggly voice, barely above a whisper, spoke words that altered the course of my life. She said to me, "Baby, no matter what we need, as long as we are together, we will always have enough." And that is more than enough reason for us to be grateful. It's been more than 30 years since my mama earned her heavenly reward, joined the mighty cloud of witnesses, and took her eternal rest. And even today, she's still teaching me how to live, how to love, how to seek, how to serve. She lived a life that was the embodiment of the parable of Jesus feeding the hungry multitude. A life that taught me what mutual aid was long before I had language to describe it. A lesson that continues to sustain me in my work and in my life, body, mind, and soul. I am eternally grateful for this, her gumbo litany. Scripture says, she has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before God. As we prepare to embark upon another harvest season, may the God of your individual understanding and your personal necessity comfort you. May that God keep you, lift countenance upon you, and give you peace. And may we all forever remember, no matter our need, to always have gratitude. I miss you, Mama, and I love you. Amen.
I'm going to get away from it, but I am going to ask again. How many of you know somebody in your life, in your community, the person who delivers your DoorDash, the person you see in Publix, the person that you know in your office, the person who lives next door to you, who should be on this stage? By show of hands. Now, the bigger ask is, who's going to actually go home and do that work? I appreciate you. Finally, I want to give a shout out to our DJ Code Blue. Also, I'm going to pay some bills and say Tennessean.com. There's a 6 months for $1 deal on the site. I'm going to once again make a public appeal for people to read. We're all hopefully educated past the 6th grade, so reading is something that is fundamental to all of us. Or if you don't want to read, you can just see what Kiana's doing online. That's perfectly okay too.
The best part to me.
So I'm going to embarrass her real fast. How many people think that she's really good at her job?
Thank you.
And how many people think she's going to win an award doing this job one day?
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you so much.
All right then. So who's into hearing stories about Black excellence and youth greatness? Well, you're here at Black Tennessee Voices, and we have a story about that for you. How many people listen to a podcast called The Brown Mama Bear? Well, the host of that podcast is here. And Shannara Williamson is a certified Enneagram coach as well. And she desires to help people learn more about who they are and how they're wired so they can be more productive at work and fulfilled in personal relationships. She's worked for nonprofits. She's worked directly with college students. As a native Washingtonian, she's worked at NPR. So, you get applause for that.
Yeah.
She's a conference organizer, on-air announcer, and I don't mean to embarrass her, but she's been married to her college sweetheart for almost 3 decades. Yeah. She's been married to her college sweetheart for almost 3 decades. How many people don't aspire to be married for 30 days? It's America in 2023. Instagram is real, TikTok is real, Tinder's real. These are all things, right? All right. So without further ado, Shannara Williamson.
Pulling it off the shelf, putting it on my chain, wearing it round my neck, I'm taking my freedom, putting it in my car, wherever I choose to go.
Well, it's 1976, and I have one of the fondest memories of being in my childhood home. You see, my sister and I had this ritual that we would do every Saturday morning. After we finished with all of our chores, we would gather our snacks, sit in front of the television set, and get ready for the best hour on television. So, we were ready for when the theme music would get started, and an animated train would come running down the station, and it would go to the beat of the music as it came on down. Well, my sister and I knew that this was something that was really special, not just because it was a dance party, but because for the first time, it was something that was happening on the inside of our home, the music we listened to, the things that meant something to us that finally got broadcast on national television. It was when afros and bell-bottoms were headliners. It was time for Soul Train. Well, you know, in my home, we didn't have enough money that we could have extra things, so we didn't go to things like concerts. But on Saturday mornings, that's when we got to see the people that we liked and the artists that we loved. It was something like Earth, Wind, and Fire in their wonderful costumes and also their synchronized movements that we were looking forward to. Sometimes we also even liked the crooning of Al Green because he would tell us, let's stay together. Sometimes it was that the dancers were even more important than any of the artists that came on. Well, what started as something that was just me and my sister always ended up with my parents coming around as well. This was family time. It was a time for all of us to be together, and it's what I learned as a place of fun, family, and music. And that was something that grounded me. Well, that's something that happened on the inside of my home. And I'm so glad that I had that on the inside of my home because I was going to need it for when we stepped out. Once I stepped out of my home and I got to the first grade, that was when I first realized that there was a difference between what happened on the inside, where we felt like we had family, we had a good time, and then when I went outside of my home. Outside looked a little different. That's when there were people who I knew a whole lot about, but they didn't know a whole lot about me. Also, when I stepped outside of my home, I wasn't so sure that all of the things that we loved in our home would also be valued. Well, when I was in the first grade, we decided that we were going to move to a new neighborhood. My parents were really excited because the realtor told us, this is a place that's good to raise a family. My parents thought this was a good thing. In their minds, they wanted to make sure that their children had better than what they had. Both of my parents grew up in the segregated South. And in that community, one of the things that was true about them is that they were very well aware of what it was like to have broken down books that were out of date and passed down from the white schools across the street. They also knew what it was like to have parents who were very hard workers but weren't compensated well for what they did. And in the midst of this, my parents still had a hope that if they could do something to make sure that their children had a quality education, well then, maybe then, the playing field is going to be leveled. So it was in this hope that my parents moved us to the suburbs because we were looking for better. What my parents couldn't know then and didn't really understand was that that search for better also put us in a place where me and my sister we had something a whole lot different than what happened inside of our home. There was a striving, there was a fighting, there was a thing that happened on the inside of us because we knew what it was like to be othered when we were in that space. When I was in the 4th grade, I had learned how to do this one thing. When you would walk into school and scan the room, looking for some eyes of someone who looked like me. It's a skill that I learned early on, and y'all, I even do it sometimes now when I need to. One of the things that happened for me in 4th grade was there was only one other black person when I scanned the room. And he was one of those silly boys who thought that girls were icky, so he was no fun anyway. But Chris Williams happened to be a little boy that one day I would find I had a lot in common with. Well, our teacher decided that we were going to have this one assignment that was going to help all of us put in context history. So she had this assignment where we had to go home, we had to talk to all of our family relatives and find out who the oldest relative was. And according to my teacher, since everybody in America is an immigrant, you had to find out what country of origin that you were from. Well, that day that we had to come and present all of our report to class, it was just me and Chris Williams that had a very short report. While everyone else had a whole lot of things to say, we only knew a continent that we were from, not a country. It seemed as if my teacher didn't even understand the position that she had put us in and how uncomfortable it was for me and Chris to just stand there without very much to say. The other thing that I don't think she understood was that our ancestors arrived in chains, not as immigrants. When we decided to continue on with that entire assignment, Chris Williams and I just looked at each other, and it was between the two of us that we did have a connection. We weren't scanning the room looking for other people. We were scanning to look for somebody who at least understood what was going on with us. Well, one of the things that I realized as a first generation after integration was that I would have a lot of those examples of those kinds of assignments that were given to me. And after the assignment was given, I realized I was not the intended target. As I continued, I realized that one of the things that was really good for me was in terms of schooling. By the time I went to college, I got the opportunity to choose where I wanted to go to school. My choice was Howard University. Well, this was a different kind of education than I had ever experienced in my life. My first year of freshman composition, my teacher was Dr. Carolyn Shuttlesworth. Now, let me tell you about her. This is a woman whose daddy helped to co-found the Southern Leadership Christian Conference in Birmingham, Alabama in the early 1960s. He was really good friends with Dr. King. He had his head beaten in several times as he was fighting for civil rights. And one time when he tried to enroll his daughters into the local high school, not only was he beaten, but their home had been bombed. So in this freshman English class, I finally had somebody who understood what was going on in America in terms of race. Not only that, this is a woman who had had something more severe than any of us sitting in the classrooms that had happened to her. In her home, they had been bombed so many times that her father, after the one that happened on a Christmas day, her father said, no more of this. And he took the family up to Cincinnati, Ohio, while he remained in Birmingham, Alabama, to continue to fight for civil rights. One of the things that was so nurturing and healing for me was to finally have a teacher who understood that I wasn't making it up when I said racism was real. She also had this kind of empathy with all of us that she wanted to hear our stories. She wanted to know where we had been and how we got to Howard University. Well, I think all of those things came together and they were a part of my story as I started to raise my children. So 17 years ago, my husband and I landed here in Middle Tennessee because of his job. And we decided that we were gonna, very much like my parents, look for the best opportunities that we could give to our children. So I did all my research. Before I got here, I was looking up schools. I was trying to find out where's the best place for my kids to be safe, to have small class sizes. What is it that I can do to try to ensure their further success? Well, we ended up finding an A-rated school, but it also put us in Franklin. One of the things that happened that first day that I was walking my kids into their elementary school is I almost just stopped and froze. There was something about the entire scene that reminded me of what it was like when I was a little girl walking into a school and I was one of the only or few black kids that are there. I knew right then and there that even as I'm trying to give my children something better, it was going to require something of me. That I was going to have to step it up and do some extra things, because I knew what it was like to go to that kind of a school. It was in that kind of a school that my very essence of who I was questioned. And there were so many times that I was even wondering what my identity was. So I wanted to make sure that my kids didn't have that same experience. I became one of those people who just decided that I want to follow this playbook that my parents made up. I knew the playbook well. When they put me in these schools where I was one person who didn't look like everyone else, they also put me in a church with some black folk around me. So we did that for our kids. Then we looked for a black doctor or a black dentist or somebody that could say, look, this kind of a representation matters. And then I took some extra time to just fill in the gaps to all of their education, because I knew I wanted them to get everything that Williamson County had to offer, but that wasn't going to be enough. There were some other things that we needed to put inside of them as well. By the time my youngest daughter graduated from high school, I realized that all of that extra work was actually valuable for someone other than me. You see, I wasn't just doing all of that work for my own family, because they just grew up and went away. But I realized this was an opportunity for me to take those things that I learned and then give them over to somebody else. So for all of the parents whose children were younger than mine, I just wanted to look behind myself and say, guess what, y'all? We made it, you can make it too. So I'm a little further down the road than you. My nest may be a little empty, but what I love to say to mothers is that there are things that you can do now to make sure that you're putting something in your children to be resilient, no matter what happens outside of your home. So that is why I created the Brown Mama Bear podcast. It's on the Brown Mama Bear podcast that I'm actually using my voice to be helpful to other parents. I wanted to make sure that for other parents, I was saying, this is an opportunity, not just a challenge. So what we do with Brown Mama Bear goes further than just a podcast. We've also started in the year 2023 to have quarterly events. I knew for a fact that what we needed to do was make sure that parents had all of the support they need. One of the things that was the most challenging thing for me to have Black children in predominantly white schools was the isolation that I felt. So I wanted to create a space where Black and brown mamas could come together and they could know that they are not alone. You see, when you're isolated, you constantly wonder if what you're doing matters. When you feel isolated, you lose a sense of perspective and a sense of hope. But when you get connected with other people who are like you, when you get connected with people who understand what the struggle is, well, then that's when you not only get some hope, but you get some really good ideas for what we can do in order to make sure that other families around us have all of the things that they need as well. So getting together with Brown Mama Bear was a podcast, but it was also doing some live events. Well, right now, one of the things that I am loving to do in my work is to find people who are going to be like the ones who give us tools to put in our toolbox. I had the opportunity to interview one woman who started a curriculum called Reconstruction.us. And in this curriculum, what she's doing is making sure that you have an online platform to fill in all of the gaps for all the books that are getting banned and all of the history that's being taken out of our classrooms. They can do that all they want to, because inside of our homes, we're going to make sure that that doesn't happen. Well, I've also been able to interview people who are therapists and writers and also public speakers and people who are giving us some really tangible solutions to the problems that Black and brown mothers have. And you guys, one of my very favorite things that I just secured is an interview next month with a woman who is the CEO for AfricanAncestry.com. You know why this one's so important to me? Because my 4th grade teacher was almost right. You know, it really is important for us to know where we come from, but it's not okay to leave out the people for whom their ancestors have been sold and taken away from their place of origin. So I've already done my DNA swab, and I'm going to get the opportunity on my podcast to find out what region on the continent of Africa that my people are from. It's in doing this work that I want to do it not just for me, but I want other women and men who are raising Black and brown children to know that these types of things are possible for you too. I am reclaiming those stories. I'm putting the pieces back together. I'm making sure that we know where we come from. Well, I believe that all children deserve to be seen, celebrated, and given the tools to succeed. That is why I created the Brown Mama Bear podcast, and that is why I cheer for mothers all the time. You see, for my empty nest, it's not good enough to just say, I'm done. It's not good enough until I have helped another brown mama bear. Thank you so much.
Right now. Shout out to all of y'all.
My mama bear is here.
Your mama bear is here?
She's right there. Hey, mama bear.
So I want to call everybody back up on the stage real fast. I want to call Patricia Bethel. I want to call Marshall Crawford. I want to thank Jill Fitchard. I want to get Timothy Hughes and Shannara Williamson back up on stage. Y'all can stand right there in the middle. Get some pictures taken of y'all and everything. Once again, thanks to all these people who shared their wonderful stories with us tonight. Coming together. One more time. Now, with your job, not my job, because my job is the writing of the words that y'all don't read, but with your job, people can follow the Tennessean online. Explain to people how they can do that real fast.
For Instagram, you can go to @the Tennessean. It's very simple.
Tennessean News.
Tennessean News, excuse me. I'm sorry. And that's on Facebook as well. You can go to Tennessean News, where we post stories all the time.
That people can read?
That people can read and click on the link and go to the actual story.
Absolutely.
You see how I did something for you?
I appreciate that.
I know you do.
So who's coming back next month? That's what I like to hear. So once again, thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for your work. Sincerely, like the fact that, we as African Americans in this state are able to stand up in front of each other and give each other strength and hope, I think that means the world. So seriously, thank you so much. And have a good evening, everyone.